We are so very excited for our next guest. This is Lauren Serota, who is the head of performance and talent at Patagonia. If they had titles, I think that at Patagonia we just don't label ourselves. So that is somewhat in the realm that you dance in.
That's right. Yeah, we are in the middle of removing hierarchical titles from our organization.
That's amazing. Well, let's just start with that because we're all about employee engagement here. And I think some things that engage employees in the traditional sense is a title. Let's get to the next level and let's reach director or get into the C-suite. That is something that is a traditional way to engage your employees. But it sounds like at Patagonia, which is already a non-traditional way of engaging our employees, that we're taking away the titles. Why?
That's a really good question. So we're taking away titles for a couple of different reasons. So if you actually think about where titles came from in terms of the origin of titles, they were traditionally coming from the royal court systems in the 1400s, from French aristocrats, and also the military has been known to use titles as a form of like a pecking order, as a form of like, I'm greater and I'm higher and I'm better than you. And what we found kind of coming into modern business day is that we've been adopting these formal hierarchical structures that were originated from the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. And it's been almost 500 years that we've been using the same title system. So why is that? Does it even work for us anymore? And the question is, as Patagonia has been changing and asking ourselves the very important question, which is, what does it mean to be around for the next 100 years? The hierarchical title systems doesn't work for us because people are using them as a form of political cachet, and it's almost a form of currency, similar to how you might think about money. So money, like titles, drives status, and it drives power, and it drives control. And we are looking to be a more inclusive, more flatter organization. And so within that, we want to remove hierarchical titles because it doesn't serve the kind of organization that we want to be around for the future.
That's amazing. It sounds so progressive. And I think everyone is watching saying, if this is successful, we're jumping on board. We're not the ones who are going to take the risk because we're afraid that it won't work out and all chaos will ensue. But it seems like Patagonia is not afraid to take risks when it comes to company culture and increasing just the overall engagement of our employees. So where does it start? Is there like a core of like, our people are first? Or is there some sort of way that you go about making sure that you maintain that talent?
So I don't really understand your question.
I guess what I'm asking is there a starting point at Patagonia for employee engagement? Is there some sort of foundation of like, people first?
Absolutely. So in 1973, when Yvon Chouinard, our founder, started the company, people are always first. And he's often quoted saying that he wanted to have a company where it was like working with your friends, where children can be around, where you would bring your spouse, your dog to work, and it felt like a place of community. So first and foremost, people have always been at the center and the heart of our culture, and that's never changed for the past 40 plus years. And there are many things that we've done throughout the years to demonstrate that people are at the core of everything we do. One of the things that we are so proud of, that we love, is our childcare center, which we've scaled to all the locations and campuses throughout Patagonia. And so starting from 8 weeks, you can drop your baby off at the childcare center, and throughout the day, on your own free time, you can go and you can breastfeed your child, you can go and hang out with your children. And the coolest thing, as being a new employee at Patagonia, is that you drop your kids off, but also, like, if in the middle of the meeting and your kid is crying or your kid is sick, like, you bring them to the meeting. Like, you can be in a meeting and you can look over and someone's blanket is spread out and their children is just sort of crawling on the floor with their toys. And it's just, you feel so integrative being there.
I mean, that is such a change of pace for most business meetings, right? You're not used to being distracted by a child who says their toy broke in the middle of a meeting, so we've got to pause everything and fix it. But the reality of the situation is that is the human experience, isn't it?
That's right.
And it sounds like we are embracing the human experience before we embrace the employee experience. And there's so much crossover there. So in a traditional organization, it's very contractual. You come work for us, you sign an agreement to say you'll do this amount of work and you'll perform at this level or whatnot, and then off you go. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, you said you were going to do this amount of work. How do we onboard employees at Patagonia, and how do we retain them in a way that is not so contractual?
Yeah, it's a really good question and definitely a challenge for Patagonia or any other large organization. So one of the things that I was told coming into my work is that, and I'm challenged by every day, I have to literally unlearn all the things that I've learned before. So what might worked in my prior careers or my prior roles might not necessarily work at Patagonia, because we're a very inclusive-based culture. And so, yes, while in theory there's a contract, like a mutual agreeable contract between us, there's much more that goes beyond that. And there's much more of a relationship that happens between employees and managers, between employees and leaders, that is just something that you can't really describe. It's just something that you feel, that there's something really special about Patagonia, and that everyone is there to serve a greater purpose than themselves, which is why we changed our mission statement a year and a half ago. So our mission statement is that we are in business to save our home planet. And there's no other greater purpose than to figure out how does that connect with me. So yes, contractually, employees show up, they do a role, they do their job, but it's more around how do I make an impact on my community? How do I make an impact in giving back into the planet versus stripping things away?
That's interesting, and you've touched on something I think that a lot of companies are struggling with, and that's finding that deeper purpose. We're not just a financial institute, we are fill in the blank, right? And it sounds like you guys have nailed the most important of all, right? You've had to rework that purpose statement, which brings so much more meaning and depth to the work that these people are doing, even though they're sitting at a desk doing finances, potentially. So what advice do you have for companies who want to develop a purpose but don't know how to start, don't know how to get there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you for asking. Personally, I have seen a lot of companies try to lift the idea of taking purpose-driven organizations and coming up with a PowerPoint deck and then taking letters and posting it into the cafe on the walls. And that just doesn't work. You can't force purpose. It's not something that you can just present, here I am, now we're this kind of purpose. It's something which I think you really have to tap into how employees are feeling and what's important for them. A lot of the times I've seen a lot of organizations drive purpose, it's from the top down, and I think it should be a bottom up process. The second thing that I would advise organizations looking to be more purpose driven is to look at the foundational things that they have in place that will drive greater connection between whatever that purpose statement is and what employees are experiencing day to day. A good example of that is at Patagonia, once you've been there for a year, we have something called our environmental internship program. So employees are able to go anywhere they want in the world, so they can go anywhere they want in the world. For 2 months, we pay them in full their salary. We pay for them to go, as long as that environmental internship is linked to something around saving the planet and giving back to communities. That's just one example of how we bring purpose to come to evolution and make connections for that individual.
That is so powerful. And again, so controversial at the same time. It's like, you're doing what? You're paying for this amazing vacation and we're going to lose all of that productivity? That sounds far from the personal development that most companies talk about. But on the other hand, it is probably one of the best things that you can do for your organization. I mean, when we're talking turnover in organizations, it's crazy to see that on average people are turning over a year and a half in, 2 years into the organization because they're burnt out from all of the work that they are doing without purpose, without amazing benefits in a lot of cases. It sounds like you're able to retain employees because you're able to create that environment.
Well, we have 3% turnover.
Come again?
We 3%.
3%.
Which is really remarkable.
That is unheard of.
Once people go there, they don't want to leave.
3%.
Yeah.
That is what we're talking about. Employee engagement is very simply that. How do we engage our employees in order to maintain our people? And so I want to ask this question. Employee engagement efforts in today's world look like, well, let's do rewards and recognition. Let's give them monetary perks, or let's track engagement, because if we can measure it, then we can improve it. And a lot of times we look at that as the solution instead of coming up with our own solution and then using the technology to support. So how do we get started? What is some advice from your time at Patagonia so far that will help change the narrative from I'm just implementing an employee engagement survey and I'm looking through it to see what I can do differently to saying, hey, it needs to come from a foundational, bottom-up way of, that's overwhelming, isn't it? How do we start?
Well, I'm probably going to say something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't like to hear, and I honestly, truly believe this because I've worked in a lot of really complex and unhealthy organizations. And I notice like what happens a lot of the time is that HR leaders make the decision to keep around employees who are not in service of that purpose or toxic, or they are holding people back, or they are what we call diminishers. They're not multiplying. And those individuals, I think, are corroding the system and are not removed from the system fast enough. And so whatever employee engagement we do, whatever analytics we do, if you still have those people getting in the way of the success or driving a more conscious-based business, you won't really achieve what you want fast enough. So you will have to, one, look at those individuals that are not in service of that purpose and say, do those individuals still need to be here? Maybe they're just not in the right role. Maybe if we gave them a different role, they might show up differently as leaders. Number two, I would advise that maybe it's just not the right fit. Maybe you are looking to create a kind of culture more purpose-driven, that's not just about bottom line. It's about making social and development impact around change. And maybe those people are not in line with that. Maybe it'd be best if they found something elsewhere. Right. And so I really feel like it starts there by looking at your baseline of the population that you have. And once you do that, I think the second step is to then tap into the individuals who are really passionate, regardless of their title, and use what we call informal authority to inspire and engage people who are trying to create momentous change inside of the organization.
That is mind-blowingly amazing. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on the show. If our listeners here want to keep in touch with you, what's the best way to keep in touch?
I would say you could directly reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and we look very forward to hearing your keynote today.
Thank you.